was they used national debt as a weapon against their own population. And that's not a cool thing to do. When I wrote what became the Amexem-Moor-Empire Constitution, in my writing of that Constitution, I took particular things into account, lessons learned, mistakes that we won't be repeating as a folk, at least not on my watch. So as I wrote what became our Constitution and presented it before the Imperial Council for it to be ratified, the Imperial Council agreed when they ratified what became the Amexem-Moor-Empire Constitution. They agreed that we won't be playing those games. Article 6 of our Constitution is very specific. We don't do banking in the Amexem-Moor-Empire. Imperial depository systems? Yes. Banking? No. Banks make loans. Credit is unconstitutional in the Amexem-Moor-Empire in Article 6 of our Constitution. We are very clear about this. The means to artificially create inflation, the means to create debt by constant borrowing, we don't have that here. The imperial government may not borrow. Again, credit within the Amexem-Moor-Empire jurisdiction and venue is unconstitutional. We won't be making those same mistakes twice. At least not on my watch. Never going to happen. It's prohibited. No constitutional monarch can even propose, let alone have an imperial council to legislate a change in what I just explained. And how they usually get around that is they would come in and create mayhem inside your jurisdiction and venue. And in the course of creating that mayhem, they move to see if they can get folks to declare an emergency and suspend your constitution. Well, Article 3 of our Constitution says we won't be doing that either. Under no circumstances can you suspend the Amexem-Moor-Empire Constitution, not in natural disaster, not in artificial disaster, not even in war. We don't play that game here. You cannot abrogate or derogate any portion of the Amexem-Moor-Empire Constitution. We're not doing that. Game over on that one. So as a consequence of these things being in play, we don't do the banking thing here. We don't do the fractional reserve banking here. We won't play any of those games. We don't have pieces of paper as claim checks for platinum, gold, or silver on deposit. We don't play those games either. Not doing that. It leads to situations that folks don't need. You're watching it happen all across the planet right now for those who have a non-substance-based economy where they deal with paper and electronic all day, where there's nothing on account. There's nothing supporting, nothing backing, quote unquote, full faith and credit. There are consequences to that. And one of the biggest things you're going to see here is parties, they borrow and borrow and borrow. They issue out all these bonds, which is borrowing. And they have national debts that are so high, it's virtually no means to really pay that off unless you're going to raise taxes on your population so high that there'll be little to no activity that will be able to support business operations that will allow for folks to continue to have a trade to go to receive the pay that they're getting, to keep that particular economy, as they would call it, going. We had to learn to stop using the word economy. We had to change things out. A lot of things we had to unlearn and redo to not make the same mistakes that other parties make. So if you're telling me the entire output of your entity is now going to service your debt, 100% what they call GDP is now being dedicated because they have to repay their debt. That's the colonizers and hostiles on this side of the ocean. As bad as that is, you know who's worse? Beijing. 300% of their annual output, what they earn in a year throughout the entire jurisdiction and venue, 300% of their GDP, as they would call it, has to service their debt. You know who's worse than them? Edo, Tokyo. 500% of their annual output has to service their debt. We don't have that issue within the Amexem-Moor-Empire. We won't be doing that. So that allows us to have a different perspective on things. It allows us to move differently. So this is why when folks ask questions about the Amexem-Moor-Empire business, they get confused. Because what do you mean you don't have credit within the Amexem-Moor-Empire? What's that even mean? They're like, what do you mean the standard accounting method does not apply within the Amexem-Moor-Empire? The general rule for accounting is assets plus liability equals equity. That formula does not work in the Amexem-Moor-Empire because liabilities are generally debts, and you can't have debt within the Amexem-Moor-Empire. We pay as we go, officially and privately. We don't play those games here. And the result of that is no debt. No debt means no worries. So our process protocols and procedures across the board are completely different because we are 180 degrees diametrically opposed unto the behavior patterns in finance and everything else of the colonizing hostiles and how they have socially engineered those who look like us to go along with their crazy. Doesn't apply within our jurisdiction and venue, and that is why in the long term we win. In the long term, parties are in massive distress. And here's the thing, how are they going to pay any of that stuff down when their populations are, as a rule, are decreasing? You're losing your tax base. You're losing your consumer base at the same time, which is causing you to lose your tax base. So where do the funds come from to pay down your debts eventually? So parties kick the can down the road, figured we'll figure that out later. Well, that bill is coming due for many at this point, and you're going to see consequences. Wars can break out over stuff like this. All type of drama can break out over stuff like this. It's not